Diane, thank you for joining. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, I'm really pleased to join. It's great.
Great to have you on. So, you run an account called Simple Politics. How do you make politics simple?
Oh my goodness, the $1 million question comes right up front. Wow, you did a mess about. It's a really, really tough one. I guess simple politics, in essence, what we do as a team is try and get people to have better conversations about politics, kinder conversations, more tolerant conversations, and just explore what you have in common with someone as well as what you think differently about. So that's what we want to do. We want people to really try and understand where other people are coming from.
That's quite the undertaking.
It is.
When did you start the account?
Okay, so I have to give all kudos to my boss, Tatton Spiller, who founded Simple Politics. He was both a teacher in the past, and then he also worked in Parliament in their education part. So trying to teach people a bit about around how Parliament actually works and the nuts and bolts of that. And what he found was there wasn't particularly anything that broke stuff down for people. And there was one particular bill he talks about quite a lot that he was trying to tell pupils about how that bill was progressing, how it was going to become law. And there was just nothing out there. So that set in his mind the emotion of, I really want to set something up, something that will get people talking, but break it down and make it easier for people to get their heads around politics. And he set that up back in 2015. So quite a long time ago. People think we're quite new, but we have been around for a long time. And that's because it wasn't an overnight success. It really wasn't. And we still get people writing to us saying they've got a great idea for a politics site, but they're really frustrated because they've only got, 50 followers. And we're like, yeah, so did we back in 2015. It takes a long time to build up audience. It takes a long time to build up trust and rapport. And we did it all organically because one of the things that we're really clear about is we want to be impartial. We want to be not affiliated to any one particular thing. So we haven't done sponsorship. We haven't had shady backers, as we call them. So that's taken a while to grow. And I actually joined the team in 2019 for the specific task of helping to cover the general election. Okay.
Yeah.
No, we did that. That was fine. We did it. We covered it. Boris Johnson got in. He had a really big majority, and Tatton and I actually sort of thought, "Goodness, I'm not sure there's going to be much to do now. I'm not sure there's going to be much to really say about this parliament," because little did we know, but we really did. We were kind of worried about running out of things to say or running out of news because a government with a huge majority can pretty much get on and do things. That so we thought. And then, a few months later, literally a few months later, COVID happened, and that set us off in a completely different direction for a while. And our account was about trying to help people negotiate the rules, trying to help people negotiate what a bubble is, what a tier is, and just trying to have conversations around some of that. And some of the devolved nations were doing different things, and what could you do in Scotland, but you couldn't do down in London. And so we had that for quite a long period of time as well. And then we've kind of come out the other side of that, back to sort of bread and butter politics and trying to keep having those good conversations. And in the interim, we had Charlotte join the team. So we're a little team of three, Tatton, myself and Charlotte. Charlotte came to be our US expert, but has stayed because she's just, really good at a lot of things. And so our little team of three now, we are basically negotiating our way through this government, and our next big milestone on the horizon is looking forward to covering the next general election.
Wow, what a time to start a politics account, and what a few years to be covering all of the things that have happened in the UK. And to try and make it into small bite-sized portions is quite the task, and I think you've done it excellently. And yeah, amazing to be able to do that and to be able to cover such a significant time as well in the UK. Incredible. So what's your background in?
Really interesting. So, I grew up in Belfast, in Northern Ireland. So politics has always been around in the background, something you can't really get away from in Northern Ireland. In a way that put me off a bit growing up, if I'm honest, because politics did feel always like a very divisive subject. But at university, I studied journalism and then really wanted to get into that, but ended up working in corporate banking and communication because life happens, doesn't it? These things happen. And I did many years working in financial communication, but it taught me a lot about breaking down complex things and trying to make them clear. It's, I wasn't a finance expert when I joined the bank, and that helped because as a layperson, it was actually better not to have the lingo and not to have that and be asking, but what does that actually mean? And what real life examples can we give to staff? So that was really useful. And the skills that I've learned there, I think, have been really useful for social media, to be honest, where you have maybe 150 to 250 words to get a really specific point across. So that was useful. And I have very much now got back into to politics in a discussion way that I wish I had had the skills to do growing up, and just to be able to ask the right questions of people, and listen is a big thing as well. The listening part is huge. We don't do that enough, listening to each other. And our comment section is amazing for that. That sometimes what we've put as we think is a really straightforward story, sometimes the comments are so different from what we've ever envisaged or imagined people taking from it, that it's actually
Yeah.
it's quite a learning curve. It
Do
just
you
shows
interact
you
with
that yeah, we do. I think we could do more. I think we could do more, but we do. Um, we let them be very self-managing. I don't know if you've noticed, but people have their own little discussions and arguments on our comments and threads, and it's fascinating to watch. And we used to be really worried about it because we just don't have the capacity to be on there 24/7 and to be governing people 24/7 and potentially removing and restricting. We're just not set up to do that. But actually, it works really well with people calling other people out, um, or really kind of saying like, but why? But why would you think that? And getting people to explain, and just sometimes letting that happen is really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure there's some wild comments, and just as you say, asking why and then listening to someone's
Mm.
answer is so important and so valuable. And even if you disagree with it, then it's still such an important aspect of it. And to be able to provide that space on the internet is something quite special, I imagine.
I think it is. I am still so surprised actually by our followers, because we've got across, so we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. I mean, Twitter's called X now, so I mean, it might be called something else when you're listening to this, but Twitter or X, Instagram, and we're on Facebook as well. We've got 1 million followers between all three of our accounts, over 1 million. And yet it's pretty good. As in, we don't get a lot of abuse. We don't have a lot of abuse on there. And if we do, as I say, people call it out and we're quick to sort that when flagged. But we've got some great followers, discussions, people who we know, and we know from DMs that they send, vote in all sorts of different directions. So we do have a spectrum of people on there, from across political beliefs. So I think we're really proud of that fact. We're not just an echo chamber, as you often hear it said on the internet, but there are people with different views on there. I think is quite unique.
Absolutely. And within your own team, you're a team of three. How do you deal with
Mm.
differing political opinions within your own team?
Yeah, so I think we do have different political opinions. Well, we do, we do. And I think that's what makes it work. So we have generally a chat catch up in the morning. So we'll do loads of reading. I'm usually up first because I've got kids and I'm up really early. We'll read papers, we'll read if any press releases have come in, we'll look at what's going to be in Parliament for the day, we'll look at all that and have a kind of an editorial meeting in the morning and say that these are maybe the things we're going to focus on for the day. And what we also tend to do is be really collaborative on posts. Just because I've written something, I will generally share it to Tat and or Charlotte, and we'll check each other. We'll give each other that sense of, you've potentially said it, or he claimed there, and that might be a little bit, maybe it should just be he said, because we like to keep very factual. We like to take the drama out of anything that we're posting. So, we will check each other in that way, and we're comfortable doing that, which is really important. So we don't fall out about it.
That wouldn't be a good start, would it?
It wouldn't. Nothing would ever get posted. But we do definitely check each other, and that's really, really useful. But I have to say, over the years I've been there since 2019 to now, there's been maybe a handful of times where we have actually said, "Do you know what, our tone on that probably wasn't quite right, and we've apologized for it." Sometimes, no matter your best intentions, you can sometimes call it wrong. And I think that's part of being human and part of saying, we always say we're a little team behind this. And sometimes we have said, that wasn't quite right. Sorry about that.
That's super interesting. It really makes sense to actually be able to say, you know what, guys, I got this wrong. And I guess that's why you've got such a loyal base and why your following just is increasing and increasing. And I think that from the posts that I've interacted with, certainly it's quite a calming way, because what you say is purely factual. You're not dramatizing it. It's a white background with your black text and then your blue logos, and it's factual. It's not got flashy images that I think you could probably break down into what psychological effects that different ways of producing media will affect people's mind before they've even read it. And I'm sure you know a lot about that, but it's really effective. And to know a bit about the background, I think will make a lot of sense to people, that it's not just by chance at all.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Headlines are wild on the internet. Clickbait. It is a wild kind of environment. Yeah.
Across different
Yeah.
papers.
Yes, that's a real favourite of ours to do, is just to compare and contrast the papers. And it's jaw-dropping sometimes. And it's tough. Do you know what? I'm not going to say it's easy. It is really, really tough when there are emotive subjects. There are big emotive subjects where it feels potentially like there's a right and wrong. That happens. But it's not helping people to make that any more emotive than it is, So I think, what you say and what you've noticed, thankfully, it hopefully works for everyone too. Keep it calm, keep it concise and factual.
But no matter how calm you can keep it, there's always going to be bad news that you need to break to people. And how do you deal with that? The cost of living crisis would be one topical element that is breaking a lot of people's hearts, as well as their bank balance. Do people
Yeah.
shoot the messenger?
Yeah, that is so, so tough. So I guess that for me, the most gut-wrenching thing we write about is child poverty. That breaks my heart to write about, to hear about. It's a really tough one. And there are some times where, you think our posting aren't jazzy, but we have a tiny bit of like blue, and normally do a bit of blue in our headline. And there are times when even that doesn't feel appropriate, and we'll just go, no, we want to be completely just clear black font. Nothing about this we can't have any frivolity about it, basically. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes we have made that call where it's just like absolute minimum, the minimum we can do around this, because it's bleak. It just is bleak, but important stuff to cover. Yeah. And even though it's going to be tough, and even though sometimes that comments are going to be pretty tough and pretty rough, that's the stuff we've got to cover. We've got to give people somewhere an outlet to talk about that.
And how do you find that the range of how people interact with different posts, different good news posts and bad news posts, or politically left or right news stories? Is there a huge range in how people react, likes, impressions, follows, comments?
Yes, there
Their
is.
trend?
Yes, yes, you are bang on. You are bang on. And we've recently had someone who wanted to help us on a work experience capacity, and they have been doing some analytics for us into that. And it's really, really interesting. And I think we're probably going to make that into a couple of posts just to show people how that actually works. Because just to give you a little snapshot, when we talk about, say, we talk about immigration, a lot of people do not like the post. They don't want to say they've liked the post. But our comments go on a huge trajectory because they want to talk about the subject, but they don't want to necessarily say they agree with a Stop the Boats bill, for example. So it's really, really interesting to see the difference. And then when we talk about, for example, when we talk about cost of living, it's pretty balanced. It just depends, what we're saying about it either way. But it does. You're absolutely bang on that. It does change, and I think it's a really interesting one to share and to share with followers.
That's wild, yeah. That the trends
Mm.
must be immense to see that. So, where do you source your information from? You mentioned that you go through a lot of the newspapers and a lot of different sources. Do you have relationships with particular media outlets?
I'll tell you how these are our main sources. So during COVID, which I talked about, we were doing so much work in terms of breaking down the government guidance that we established relationships with lots of the press offices. So we do get press releases when things are happening, which is really useful. But again, we take those as press releases and we do our own thing with them. We read a lot, and we read from sources that you wouldn't necessarily buy a paper from yourself, but we read across the spectrum because that's important. So that's something we read across the board. But what a lot of people don't realize, and what's really, really useful, is that most of Parliament is actually televised. And so we can be our own primary source for this stuff, which is brilliant. So PMQs is televised. Lots of the committees are televised. Lots of the proceedings are televised, to be honest with you. So it's constantly on in the background for us, because then you'll get quotes firsthand rather than getting it second or third hand from another feed. That's probably the biggest thing. If you want to see how it all works, watch some of Parliament TV, watch some of it. Sometimes it's really frustrating, like Prime Minister's questions can be frustrating in all way, from all parties in all ways. Just the setup of it, we're always talking about that as a team on a Wednesday. What snacks have we got to watch it? And number two, just about how many questions were actually answered and how many good responses we got, and were good questions asked, basically. But it's really fascinating, and it's there. It's anyone can access that.
And I guess that then that it's accurate because it's straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. Because I was going to ask you how you make sure that everything that you publicize is accurate. How do you fact check?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're a super small team, so can't be an investigatory body. We can't go off, saying Keir Starmer said £10,000. Can we go through a Labour account and find out if it's true? Rishi Sunak said 30 hospitals. We don't have the resources. I'd love to be doing that stuff, but we don't have the resources to do it. But what we do is we can literally report, and we do report on, this is what the Prime Minister has said. This is what the manifesto said. We can compare and contrast. What has anything changed over time? What is the target today versus the target it was a year ago? We're very good at doing that. And what are the opposition saying, and what did they say a year ago? It's factual and to the point. And again, we're a simple politics site. Hopefully we spark people's love of topics and politics and debating and interest, that they will then maybe read a bit further on a topic, or do some of their own research. That's to be encouraged.
And how do you, after your day of work, switch off your mind? I assume that you won't have BBC News notifications on your phone because that would be very much like work. But how do you just, yeah, do you turn the radio off? Do you try and get a bit of respite from it? Or is there any switching off?
I think we all react really differently in the team. Monday to Friday, I'm fairly switched on. So I do have my notifications on till about 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, I do. Especially if it's a busy period, especially if you're thinking about by-elections, for example, or, things that might happen through the night, counting, voting, etc., etc. So I will tend to digest a lot of news, a lot of information Monday to Friday. But my big rule for me is weekends are free. Weekends I completely switch off, and Tatton tends to cover at weekends. I just need that. I need that 2-day break, Saturday and Sunday. Just not having that instant response to what is it? What's happened next? And that works really, really well for me. But as a team, again, it's who you work with and the conversations we've had. We all know sort of where each other's at headspace wise. And sometimes people just might need an afternoon or to go, do you know what? I need to go on a really long walk because that was intense this morning. And that's fine. And we're really lucky in that regard. Prioritizing our mental health is something that Tatton feels really strongly about. So that's really good.
And what happens if you finished up for the day and it's 10:30 at night, you're about to turn your phone off and a massive news story comes in? Are you straight on creating a post to go up?
If it's big enough, yes, that has happened. And the funny thing is that if I creep downstairs and put my laptop on, generally one of the other two will be on as well. And we'll be like, oh, did you see this? It is a hard thing to switch off from, definitely.
And it affects your life in every way. Like everyone's life is affected by politics, and to not be able to switch off, because even if you're on holiday, you might still have to pay your electricity bill, which is affected by the cost of living, which is affected by politics that you're working with. So it must be really hard to switch off.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And you end up, I think, once people know what you do as well, you end up inevitably having more conversations about politics as well with friends, is inevitable. And I don't mind. I think that's great as well. And I think you really hit, something on the head there when you talk about how it affects everything. I think more and more as an account, we are talking about issues. This is politics at its very, very essence. We're talking about the fact that there are problems or issues, and that different people have got different ideas for how to solve them. And that's at a very basic level what politics is all about. One party might feel that the solution is something, another party thinks differently, and it's understanding the rationales and the reasons why. But there are big things that affect all of us, and those big issues, it's just everyone trying to get their head around what the best way to deal with those is. And I think people want to know about those debates and it being simplified in that way a lot more than they want to know the very, very technical detail of the House of Lords, for example, because that's almost by the by. It's the big stuff. It's the, what gets us really thinking about what kind of society we want and what choices we want to make. And that's the fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility to tell people that the influence that we all actually have on our society. We need to understand that we have that responsibility to do that. And I imagine that's a big part of the whole aim of your account, is to break down the barriers to, when you say politics, people think, oh my goodness, I don't know, I haven't read the newspaper, it's changing every day, I don't understand how this works. But actually, there are basics as well. There are understandable points as well as all the technicalities you referred to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think everybody can think about the things that impact them directly and how they would want those to work. And then, and then you can get onto trickier things like where the money comes from and what you might cut to keep something else, But fundamentally, I think, people can really get behind talking about really specific issues because they do affect everyone.
aside from the bigger news stories that will come about every so often, what's the structure that you work through weekly for your social media? Do you have a certain number of posts a day? I imagine you do recaps on things. How do you structure it?
Great question. So we tend to be quite flexible with what we post on a day. Normally, we like a morning post, you know, the commuter post, the you're going to work post, you're just having a sneaky look on your phone. So we like to get everyone with something to start, like start a conversation in the
No one
morning.
likes to admit that
Um,
they'll be on Instagram on the tube, but I imagine there's actually quite a large number of people who see your
yeah,
fresh.
I would say so. And then you know, throughout the day we'll post as and when, if there's breaking news, if there's a specific committee or a nice quote from PMQs, etc. And then at night we do a daily thing, literally called Nightly News. We didn't waste much time thinking about that title, and that's just a recap of some stories through the day, generally things we haven't done a main post about but they're still really important, and we mop those up through the day and then put them into Nightly News. And we do a similar thing on a Saturday morning called In Case You Missed It, which is, I love that. I really love that post so much, but it's just a recap of the things where there wasn't quite time or it didn't quite feel like, you know, a major post, but usually 5 things that we just thought, that's really interesting. So we'll keep it and do it on a Saturday morning. And then back for the summer, we've got a little debate club as well, which is going to be on a Thursday night. And again, that's just getting people to debate a single issue. That works really, really well. So really pleased to have that back. But that's our kind of, sorry, my cat is meowing. But that's our kind of standard week. And then probably sprinkled in there with a lot of other news that we didn't see coming.
Exactly, yeah. And you mentioned that you're predominantly on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Do you vary the content? Are the audiences vastly different, or can you say similar stories on each one?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we do very similar posts on each place, but the reaction is different on each one. Twitter, we don't do as well on because Twitter is a very different beast. You know, you've got a lot of political correspondents and journalists and Westminster boards already on there. So they tend to know their stuff pretty well. They're not an audience who particularly might respond as well to our explainers and breakdowns and things like that. Whereas Instagram and Facebook, we tend to do a lot better on, because on Instagram it's fascinating, but we can see from our analytics most people who follow us on Instagram don't follow another news feed. So
Yeah.
we might be the only way they're accessing news online, which is
Yeah.
phenomenal. It's huge. So that says a lot about why we do so well on Instagram, because for a lot of people, it's kind of a unique thing in their timeline.
And what's the age group that follow you?
Predominantly, it's under 30s, a huge group in the 18 to 24.
So many people who follow your account, and that's quite rare that you'd see like so many people. It's clearly, yeah,
Yeah,
everyone,
yeah.
this is like, I need this.
Yeah. And, you know, it's an age range that is having less and less of a relationship with traditional media. So that's great that we're there in that space, because if we weren't and there was a kind of vacuum there, there could be more unreliable sources around. Whereas we pride ourselves on being really trustworthy, straightforward, independent. And if people in that bracket who aren't accessing news elsewhere are getting it from us, then we feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, and how has your account grown? Started in 2015, and then there was general elections, and then there was COVID, and then everything that's gone on since then. Have you seen major growth spurts? Has it been a steady
Yes.
increase? Now over 1 million followers across your socials, which is quite an achievement.
It's a really interesting story. So I think it was very gradual, slow gains at the beginning. And Tatton did a lot of work He had some other people who worked on the account very early on with him, and they did a lot in terms of outreach in schools, getting out and about, talking about it. They did some live shows. They really, really did try and spread the word. And the account had grown to a certain level. It was on Instagram when I joined, and doing kind of okay. The big, huge gain for us was people seeing us as a reliable source of information during the pandemic. That was huge. But what we always talk about and feel really proud of is that people might have joined for that reason, might have followed, might have subscribed for that reason, but they've stayed, they've hung around, they've stayed when it's gone back to BAU politics, and that's good because we've kept people interested. We've kept people who want to talk about other things now. So that's really good. We've seen other little spikes. It's interesting with news, isn't it? But, it tends to be big stuff where we see spikes. So when the war on Ukraine was first declared, we saw a massive spike, like 20,000 in a week, something like that, But again, whatever brings people to Simple Politics, if we can keep them, if we can maintain them as followers, then that's brilliant.
And you've branched into podcasting as well. There's a Simple Politics podcast. How has this been received?
Yeah, it's going good. We have a lovely host called Kobe who really holds things together for us, because if it was just me and Tatton, it would be, who knows what would happen. So he does a brilliant job pulling things together. And actually, we talk about what posts have gone down well. So kind of like, this conversation we're having, which is good. Yeah. So we talk about what people have over the past week really commented on and what's really resonated. So that's good for us, actually, because it's like a bit of a review when we talk about it. So it's something we'd probably do anyway, but we're just doing it and recording it.
So what topics do you cover as well as the review? Do you find that people ask questions and comment and just want more?
Yeah, we do. We try and cover a little bit of questions that come in through the DMs, which is good. And then and they're very varied. And then we do a little bit of, we normally call it PM watch, but sometimes we do Keir Starmer watch. We don't really have visuals on them, but we talk about what a leader has been up to that week, basically. Quite a lot of the time it's Rishi Sunak, but sometimes it's Keir Starmer, just so that people are aware of the other things that might not be in Parliament. So when they have specific meetings or they've done speeches elsewhere, we can talk about that.
Any tips for people who are trying to keep up to date with politics but are just overwhelmed by the negativity?
Wow, that is a really good question. I would say you can keep out of comment sections if you want, just headline news and be done. You don't need to. I think once you open that, once you delve in there, it can be quite tempting to potentially get involved in debates and stuff. And if that's not for you, then that's not for you. Just, you can take in the bits that you need to take in and not get involved in the discussions. But do switch off as well. I talk about having the breaking news feeds on. I don't think that's for everybody. I do think, even if it's 5 minutes a day, trying to keep yourself updated from a reliable source that that you trust, that's not going to make you feel anxious about it, then that's absolutely fine. Or talk to friends that will be good sounding boards, or who won't make you feel silly for asking, some more obvious questions. Yeah, that's my recommendations.
And following on from that, what advice would you give? I've written to young people here, just to which I guess is relevant for you guys, as a lot of your followers are young people who are trying to navigate and keep up with politics. Maybe there's any good social media could plug?
Yes, absolutely. Simple Politics all the way. No, definitely give us a follow, give us a DM. If anything really doesn't make sense, drop us a line. If you'd like to see a specific post, drop us a line. Really, really happy to hear from people directly and get back to you. But also just remember that when it seems overwhelming, when it seems like everything is just a little bit much, remember, this is just talking about the issues we have in the UK and what are the different ways of solving them. And that's all politics is. It's around that. And if you can get your head around that, then I think you'll make a big leap forward in just trying to understand all the rest of it.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to someone who's trying to establish a career in politics?
Good luck. No. No, I'd say great. I'd say we need people coming through who can show tolerance, who can show that there are things that we can agree on as well as disagree on, and they should be highlighted. And if people can come through with a more collaborative approach to solving political issues, and if that sounds like you, and if you're already starting to do that and make a difference in your community or locally, then yes, go for it, because we need more people like that.
And finally, what does the future hold for Simple Politics?
Woo! We really want to concentrate on making the next general election, when it happens, when it's announced, and the run up to it, as simple and straightforward as possible. We want to break down what each of the parties will propose. We want to break down how it will all work, keep people engaged. That will be the next big thing on the horizon for us.
Amazing. That's great. It's been such a good conversation, and knowing why the account has been started and also how it's progressed over the years. I think it's so insightful to be able to talk to you about that, and it's such a great follow, and it really breaks down these big topics that are so overwhelming. Thank you so much, Diane, for coming on to the podcast and talking to me about that.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having us.
How will people find you guys on all social medias? If you just give us your handles.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just at Simple Politics on Instagram and Facebook, and we're at Easy Politics UK on Twitter.
And they also have their podcast that you need to check out as well. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.